He was just the boy who carried pizza boxes into the night, until one forgotten sketchbook made the head of Columbia's architecture school weep. Nights in Harlem moved with the slow rhythm of an old man's steps. The streets whispered with cold drafts that slid through iron railings and shuttered storefronts. Diego bent forward over his bicycle, a stack of pizzas strapped to the rack, the scent of cheese and oregano rising behind him like a faint warmth in a city that seldom offered warmth freely. Every red light caught his reflection in the glass of corner shops. Tired eyes, a worn jacket, sweat on his brow. There was no fear in those eyes anymore, but neither was there rest. From 125th Street to Morningside Heights, the hill stretched like a small pilgrimage. At its crest, Columbia University glowed against the dark. White marble steps and stately columns of Butler Library lit with gold, like a ship docked in the harbor of the city. Students crossed the campus briskly, laughter echoing, bags heavy with books. Diego approached quietly, unseen, another figure in motion, except he carried food rather than degrees. He stopped at a dormitory, rang the buzzer, handed over the fourth pizza of the night with a smile no larger than a sigh. The student mumbled thanks and shut the door. Diego did not hurry away. On his back, beneath the insulated delivery bag, was a cloth satchel. Inside it lay what was heavier than the money in his pocket, a sketchbook. Its pages smelled of graphite and sleeplessness. He did not sketch faces or bodies. What Diego drew was space. Roofs that bent to catch summer winds. Courtyards shaped to pull daylight deep inside. Cross-ventilation plans penciled in neat lines with side notes. Air moves from high to low pressure. Window openings, minimum 20% of opposing walls. Next to it, in smaller writing, he added, stack effect. Hot air rises, so let it out through higher vents. Cool air enters low. Then, like a whisper to himself, a formula. Q-E-M-T. He knew it meant nothing to most. To him, it meant heat leaving a home, measured in numbers, made visible. When the deliveries slowed, Diego often slipped into the library. He had learned how to walk with the tired grace of a student so no one asked for his ID. Inside, the silence embraced him. He sat at a wooden table under tall lamps, spread out pencils of varying hardness, and let his hands wander into the dream of shelter. Tonight, he was testing an idea for a green roof, a thin soil layer with plants, water channels, and light structural beams. On the page, he scribbled, dead load increase 100-200 kilopasmau. Check stress, S equal FA. Use triangular trusses to distribute load. He smiled faintly. Triangles, he believed, were the bones of resilience. They held like the ribs of a kite against the wind. Far away in the library, a group of students laughed too loudly. They spoke of their professor, Lawrence, the head of the architecture school, legendary, severe, uncompromising. Diego had heard the name often, whispered with both admiration and dread. A man who, they said, could dismiss a design with a glance if it lacked truth. Diego wondered what such a man might see in his lines. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps something. He dared not imagine further. His phone buzzed. Another order. Diego packed his pencils swiftly, tugged the satchel closed, and slung it across his back. In his rush, the sketchbook slipped from the bag and slid beneath his coat on the chair. He didn't notice. He picked up the warm pizza box and vanished into the night like a shadow on two wheels. The library grew quiet again. And then came the sound of a cart rolling, the shuffling of old shoes. Professor Lawrence, silver-haired, tall in posture though bent slightly by age, paused beside that same table. He was not searching for a sketchbook. He had come for a volume on classical facades, yet his eyes caught the brown cover, half hidden. He lifted it gently, as though it were a bird. His thumb brushed across indentations of hard pencil work. Curious, he opened it. The first drawing stopped him. A staircase outdoors, 2 runs meeting at a broad landing, shaded to funnel breezes through an open court. Notes in the margins. Deep shade at least 4 meters. Overhang angled for summer sun 72 degree, winter sun 26 degrees. The numbers were not copied from a textbook. They were lived observations, precise, modest. Page after page revealed structures of startling clarity. Small modular houses built of pallet-sized frames, each 2.4 by 3 meters, hinged and joined with simple bolts. One note read, "Affordability target, within 2 months of janitor's wages." Another explained R values of insulation. R is resistance to heat. Higher R means warmer in winter, cooler in summer. Simple. In one sketch, rainwater was caught in roof channels, filtered through sand, stored for flushing toilets and watering rooftop gardens. At the bottom of a page, in a hand pressed hard enough to indent the paper, "A house doesn't need to be grand. It only needs to be warm, strong, and merciful." Lawrence closed the book. His hands trembled, not from weakness but from recognition. He had reviewed thousands of projects, some brilliant, many hollow, but these were different. They did not plead to impress. They simply were true. He looked around, searching for the owner. The seats were empty. He approached the desk, asked the librarian. No one had noticed a boy, except a glimpse of a delivery bag. Lawrence stood still, listening to the silence as if it might tell him. Finally, he slid the sketchbook into his coat, pulled out a scrap of paper, and wrote in strong cursive, "Borrowed for safekeeping. We will meet again. Lawrence." He left it on the table. Later that night, Diego returned, sweat-soaked from pedaling, coins of tip clenched in his palm. He slipped back to the table, reached for his satchel, pulled it open. Empty. His pulse spiked. He searched under the chair, beneath the jacket on the floor. Nothing. Panic tightened his chest. That sketchbook was not just paper. It was the story of his nights, of his mother's pain, of his father's absence, of every page drawn instead of sleeping. Then his eyes caught the note. He unfolded it with trembling fingers. The signature struck like a hammer, Lawrence. For a moment he could not breathe. The name belonged to a man far above his world, a man who lived in tall halls of judgment. Diego gripped the edge of the desk, whispering a prayer without words. Was this loss or salvation? He could not tell. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady. He rode home under its rhythm, every droplet like a pencil mark on the night. His mother was asleep when he entered, the single lamp glowing amber. Diego warmed soup quietly, then sat beside her bed. She stirred, her face weary but kind. He held her hand and whispered, "Mama, I lost the sketchbook. Someone found it. He left his name, Lawrence." Her lips curled in the faintest smile. "Sounds like a noble name," she said softly. "Maybe it means kindness." He bowed his head. "I hope so." Then, as he often did, he spoke of his drawings, the green roof that might keep summer heat away, the cross breeze that might cool without electricity, the trusses that might hold a roof steady in a storm. His mother listened with closed eyes, nodding as if each word was a lullaby. She understood, not the formulas, but the hope. Later, lying on his thin mattress, Diego stared at a crack in the ceiling, thin as a scar across plaster. He thought of stress loads, of wood beams tired with age. He thought of triangles again. He smiled weakly. His mind never rested. And now, somewhere in the city, Professor Lawrence held his work. Tomorrow, Diego decided he would not wait for fate. He would go to the steps of the architecture building. He would sit until someone saw him. For once in his life, he would not deliver pizza. He would deliver himself. The morning after the lost sketchbook, the sun rose pale over Harlem, as if hesitant to warm the streets. Diego wheeled his bike down the narrow stairwell, careful not to wake his mother. She had smiled in her sleep, her breath steady, but he had not rested. His mind circled around one thought: Lawrence. The name belonged to a man far above him, a man known across campus. Students described him with both reverence and fear. Professor Charles Lawrence, head of the School of Architecture, critic with eyes like a scalpel. His lectures were legend. He had once torn a student's design in half in front of the class, saying, "If you can't bear your work being tested, you'll never bear the world's weather against it." Yet he was also known for weeping once, long ago, at a memorial service for an architect who had died too young. That story passed through generations of students, proof that beneath the steel was flesh. Diego did not know what Lawrence would do with his sketches. He only knew that the note said, "We will meet again." So Diego went. At 9 that morning, he sat on the steps outside Avery Hall, the tall brick building that housed Columbia's architecture school. Students streamed past with tubes of drawings and models of foam board. They noticed him, dark-haired, delivery jacket, no student badge, but he kept still. He watched the doors. His stomach was empty, but his heart was full of a strange calm. At last, close to 10, a figure appeared inside the glass. Tall, silver hair, straight-backed despite the years. Lawrence stepped out, scanning the crowd, then halted. His eyes rested on Diego, as though he had expected him all along. "You must be Diego," he said. The boy stood quickly, lowering his head. "Yes, sir." Then, awkwardly, "Professor." Lawrence reached into his coat and pulled out the sketchbook. He held it not as a possession, but as something entrusted. "This is yours. But before I give it back, I want to ask you something." They walked to a small faculty lounge, lined with worn chairs and a humming kettle. Lawrence set the book on the table and opened to a page. His finger touched the note about our values and insulation. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. His voice was not accusing, only curious. Diego hesitated, then spoke plainly. "From books I found, from videos online, from talking to construction workers when I deliver food to sites. I make models from cardboard and tape. To see if the wind flows right, I light incense and watch the smoke." Lawrence's lips curved slightly. "That's the old way. To see with your own eyes, not just numbers. Tell me then, why triangles?" He tapped the page showing the truss roof. Diego took a wooden stir stick from the counter, drew a quick sketch on the tabletop with a drop of water. "Because a triangle cannot change shape if the joints are fixed. A square bends, but a triangle holds. So the load is carried by compression in one member, tension in another. Even weak wood can serve if placed where its strength is needed most." Lawrence's eyes softened. "Correct." For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the kettle. Then the professor leaned back. "You do not study here, do you?" Diego shook his head. "No, sir. I deliver pizza at night. I care for my mother in the day." Lawrence's hand rested on the sketchbook. "Diego, what you have drawn is more advanced than what many final-year students manage. But the university is a fortress of rules. You cannot enroll without papers, exams, tuition. Still," he paused, "still, talent like yours cannot be ignored." He poured 2 cups of tea, slid one across. How would you like to attempt a challenge? Diego's heart thumped. A challenge? Yes. In my studio, students are working on modular housing for the homeless. It is an exercise, but the city sometimes listens. I will give you the same task. Build a design. You may work here quietly after your shifts. You will be a guest, nothing more, for now. But if your design convinces me, I will find a way to protect you. Diego hesitated. He saw his mother's face, her weary smile, the cracks in their ceiling. He swallowed. I accept. Lawrence nodded. Good. But know this. Architecture is not drawing pretty pictures. It is mathematics, married to mercy. Every line you make is a promise that someone can sleep without fear. Do not waste the pencil. He slid a blank sheet toward Diego. Begin here. Tonight. That evening, after his deliveries, Diego returned. The lounge was quiet. A stack of paper, a dull knife, and a metal ruler awaited him. Lawrence sat with a book, letting the boy take his time. Diego sharpened his pencil slowly, then asked, "Professor, what exactly do you want?" Lawrence closed his book. A module house. Constraints. Cost no more than 2 months' wages of a janitor. Energy use as low as possible. And one more condition. He leaned forward, eyes sharp but kind. Explain it so that an old man, say 70, can understand without diagrams, because buildings are not for professors, they are for people. Diego smiled nervously. Yes, sir. He drew a rectangle. 1 unit, 3 meters long, 2.5 wide. The size of a pallet, easy to carry. Roof pitched for rain. Cross-ventilation windows on each side. He shaded lightly. When hot air rises, we give it an exit above. Cool air enters from the other side, like a chimney turned sideways. Lawrence nodded. Good. And what about privacy? A curtain instead of a wall, Diego answered. Cheap, flexible. When families grow, they can add another module. When they move, it folds flat. And water? Diego sketched channels along the roof. Rain into gutters, sand filter, storage barrel. Enough for toilets and watering rooftop plants. Not for drinking, but still dignity. Lawrence sat in silence, then finally chuckled. Diego, you speak the language of necessity better than many who speak the language of luxury. The boy lowered his head, embarrassed. I just want a roof that my mother would not be ashamed to live under. The professor looked at him long and hard. Then he placed a temporary library card on the table. This will let you enter at night. Use it carefully. Do not boast. Let your work speak first. Columbia is full of jealous eyes. Diego picked up the card. It was light as paper, yet heavy with meaning. Thank you. Lawrence rose. No thanks, just work. Remember, architecture begins where the rain ends, at the roof. Make me believe your roof can keep the rain out. Outside, the night air was sharp with the smell of wet leaves. Diego rode home slowly, card in his pocket, future on his shoulders. He opened the apartment door quietly. His mother stirred, asking with half-closed eyes, Long night, hijo? Diego smiled. A long night, but one that might change us. She squeezed his hand, weak but steady. Then go on. Don't stop drawing. One day these lines will shelter someone. Maybe even me. Diego nodded, fighting the sting in his eyes. When he finally lay down, the ceiling crack above him seemed smaller, less threatening. Tomorrow, he would return to the lounge. Tomorrow, he would begin building not only sketches, but hope. Columbia's studios after dark were like cathedrals stripped of ceremony, long tables scattered with rulers, cardboard, foam, and the faint smell of glue. Under the glow of desk lamps, models of towers and bridges stood like small cities awaiting judgment. For Diego, stepping into that space felt like trespassing into a dream. Professor Lawrence had arranged it quietly. At 10 o'clock, after Diego's pizza deliveries, the janitor unlocked the side door. "The professor says you're expected," the man muttered with a half-smile. Diego nodded, grateful, then entered as though into a holy place. On one table sat sheets of paper, pencils, and a stack of thin cardboard. Nothing else. The professor had not left instructions, only the emptiness of expectation. Diego sat. He inhaled, exhaled, then opened his satchel to retrieve his pencil. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Draw, hijo. Draw until the walls you dream become real." He began with a box, simple, 3 meters by 2.5, the unit size he had spoken of. Then he drew an arrow across it, marking airflow. Above, a pitched roof with gutters. He added a rain barrel in the corner, with a sand filter. His notes were neat. Rain, sand, storage, toilets, plus plants. He added the numbers, 20 liters per square meter of roof during a heavy rain, enough to fill a barrel in a single storm. He paused, shading lightly, then wrote, "Privacy, curtains, not walls." Flexibility over permanence. The studio was so silent he could hear the scratching of graphite. He worked until his hands were blackened with pencil dust, until his back ached from leaning over. Then he heard footsteps. Professor Lawrence entered without hurry, coat draped over his arm. His eyes scanned the page. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he pulled out a chair. "Explain." Diego straightened. "This is the basic module, Professor. Sized for easy transport. A janitor's 2 months' wages might pay for one, if materials are salvaged wood and recycled insulation. The roof slope is 15 degrees, enough for rain runoff, not too steep for low cost. Gutters feed into a barrel, not drinking water, but usable." "And airflow?" Lawrence asked. "Cross-ventilation," Diego replied. "Openings on opposite walls. At least 20% of the wall area. When air enters one side and exits the other, heat leaves. If you add a vent above, you create a chimney effect. Hot air rises and escapes. That lowers indoor temperature without fans." Lawrence tapped the sketch. "And winter?" Diego nodded. "Curtains trap warm air at night. Insulation panels from compressed cardboard and mylar foil. R value maybe 3 per inch. It keeps warmth." The professor leaned back. His face revealed nothing. "And dignity?" Diego swallowed. His pencil hovered. Then he said softly, "Dignity is not numbers. It is a space where a mother can close a curtain and feel safe to rest. Where children can draw on the walls without fear of rain. Where the poor can say, 'This is mine.'" For the first time, Lawrence smiled. A brief, rare smile, like sunlight breaking stone. "Continue," he said. Days passed like this. Every night after work, Diego came. He built models from cardboard, cut with dull blades until his fingers blistered. He tested roofs, walls, angles. He measured with string and tape when rulers were missing. Slowly, a small city of modules grew on the studio table, yet not all eyes were kind. One evening, as Diego arranged 2 units side by side, a group of students entered, laughing, carrying their own models. They stopped when they saw him. A boy with sharp cheekbones and expensive shoes sneered. "Who's this?" he asked. "Does he even belong here?" Another whispered, "He's the pizza guy. I've seen him with boxes." Diego lowered his head, continued cutting. The students circled him like crows. The sharp-cheeked one picked up Diego's model, turning it in his hands. "Cardboard and tape?" he mocked. "We're printing 3D modules, and you're playing with cereal boxes." Diego said nothing. His silence made them angrier. "You don't have a student card, do you?" the boy pressed. "What are you, some charity case the professor picked up?" Before Diego could answer, Lawrence's voice thundered from the doorway. "Put it down, Adrian." The boy startled, nearly dropping the model. Lawrence's eyes cut through him. "A model is not judged by its material, but by its truth. Go work on your own designs before you presume to mock another's." Adrian flushed, muttered something, and the group retreated. Lawrence approached Diego. "Do not waste energy on them," he said. "Architecture has always been divided between those who build for beauty and those who build for survival. You know your side." "Hold it." Diego nodded. Inside, though, a wound opened. He felt the sting of being an outsider. No badge, no certificate. Just a boy with tape and cardboard. He wanted to belong, yet pride chained his tongue. That night, he worked harder. He cut triangles into trusses, glued beams into place, tested roofs by pouring water from a pitcher. It held. He smiled faintly, imagining rain falling and a mother inside, dry and warm. 1 week later, Lawrence called him to the front of the empty studio. "It is time," the professor said. "You will present your design to my research group." Diego froze. "But, Professor, I'm not a student." "You are a designer," Lawrence said firmly. "The rest is paperwork." The day of the review, Diego stood before 6 graduate students and 1 visiting lecturer. On the table was his model, 5 modules linked, forming a cluster around a shared courtyard. Gutters led to a common barrel. Curtains gave privacy. The courtyard was shaded by a roof angled for summer sun, open for winter light. His voice trembled at first, but then steadied. "This is housing for families with no home. Each unit can be carried, unfolded, connected. Cost, 2 months' wages of a janitor, insulation from recycled material, cooling by cross-ventilation and chimney effect, water recycled from rain, privacy by curtain, dignity by ownership." He explained each note patiently with the care of someone teaching not experts but elders who wanted to understand. When he finished, silence filled the room. Then one graduate student whispered, This is better than my final project." Another murmured, "It's practical. It could be built tomorrow." The visiting lecturer leaned forward. "Who is this boy?" Lawrence did not answer directly. He only said, "He is a reminder that genius does not always arrive with tuition receipts." Diego bowed his head. His hands trembled. He had spoken, and they had listened. That night he returned home exhausted but alive with hope. He sat by his mother's bed and told her everything. She laughed softly, though her voice was weak. "I told you, hijo. The world needs roofs. It does not care who draws them." Diego held her hand. "Maybe, Mama, but the world does care about names, and mine is not on the paper." She squeezed his hand faintly. "Then make your name by building, not by begging." Diego nodded. Her words sank deep, heavier than any stone. As he lay down to sleep, the crack in the ceiling no longer looked like failure. It looked like a line waiting to be repaired. The following nights blurred together, deliveries, coins of tips, then the quiet crossing into Columbia's studio, where Diego worked alone among models and papers that smelled of ambition. He did not have a student ID, but Lawrence's word was enough. The janitor always unlocked the side door. "The professor said you'll be here," he muttered, then left Diego to his shadows. In those hours after midnight, Diego became what he had always dreamed. Not a delivery boy, not the son of a paralyzed mother, but an architect in the making. He cut cardboard into walls, folded trusses, tested water flow with droplets from a bottle cap. His notes were growing bolder. Load path, vertical through studs, lateral resisted by bracing, U value equals 1 and R. For R10, heat loss cut in half. Yet beside the formulas, he scribbled words only his heart could write. House eats hope, roof eats mercy, door eats dignity. Lawrence came often, watching in silence, correcting only with the smallest gestures. Once, when Diego drew a roof too steep, the professor tapped the line. At this angle, material cost doubles. Remember, beauty is only merciful if it is affordable. Diego erased the line without protest. But not everyone shared Lawrence's quiet faith. It began with whispers. Students saw Diego's models spreading across the corner tables, simple yet elegant clusters of modules. Some frowned, others scoffed. One evening, as Diego worked, Adrian, the same sharp-cheeked student who had mocked him before, approached with two friends. His model, printed in glossy white plastic, gleamed under the light. He set it down deliberately next to Diego's cardboard. "Funny," Adrian said, picking up Diego's module. "These look familiar." Diego didn't raise his eyes. He kept drawing, though his hand tightened on the pencil. Adrian smirked. "Maybe I'll submit something like this for my presentation. After all, ideas are free, aren't they?" Diego's chest burned, but he said nothing. Silence was the only defense he knew. Lawrence entered moments later, and Adrian dropped the model back onto the table. But not before Diego saw the look, the hunger in Adrian's eyes to claim what was not his. The tension grew in the weeks that followed. Diego continued working, improving his modules. He added details. Solar chimney for passive cooling, angle toward south. Thermal mass from water barrels to regulate night temperatures. He explained in plain words to himself. The sun heats the air in the chimney. Hot air rises, pulling cool air inside. Water barrels absorb heat by day, release it by night. Yet each time he saw Adrian in the studio, Diego felt the sting of invisibility. Adrian had a badge, a name on the roster, a future lined with credentials. Diego had only his drawings. The turning point came one late night. Lawrence handed Diego a sealed folder. "This," he said, "is a proposal for a pilot project downtown, a small cluster of emergency shelters. The city has asked for ideas." Diego froze. "You mean real houses?" Lawrence nodded. "Real. And I want you to add your modules to this proposal. Quietly. No signatures, no names. Just the work." Diego's throat tightened. "But Professor, without a name, it's like I don't exist." Lawrence looked at him long. "Diego, sometimes the work must be born before the name. The roof matters more than the author. Let your design live, and in time, your name will follow." Diego lowered his head. He knew the professor was right. Still, a part of him longed, not for fame, but for acknowledgement. 2 nights later, Diego watched as Lawrence presented the pilot designs to a small group of city planners and senior faculty. He was not allowed in the meeting. He sat outside the glass, clutching his satchel, staring at shadows moving across the room. He saw them lean over the models. He saw fingers pointing at his modules. He saw heads nodding. After an hour, the meeting ended. The faculty left in quiet discussion. Lawrence emerged, face unreadable. He walked past Diego without speaking, then paused. "Your design," he said at last, was the one they lingered over. Diego exhaled, his chest finally loosening. "But," Lawrence added, "Adrian tried to claim it." Diego's stomach dropped. He... What? The professor's eyes darkened. He submitted sketches nearly identical to yours. Fortunately, I knew the truth. But others, they are not so certain. Jealousy will rise. Be ready. Diego's fists clenched. Professor, maybe I should leave. I don't belong here. Lawrence stepped closer. His voice was low, steady. Diego, the measure of belonging is not a badge. It is whether your work holds when the rain comes. And yours does. That night, Diego returned home heavy with doubt. His mother noticed at once. What troubles you? She asked, her voice weak. He sat by her bed. Someone wants to steal my work, and I cannot fight. I have no papers, no name, only drawings. His mother squeezed his hand. Listen, hijo, you don't draw for the thief. You don't even draw for the professor. You draw for the one who will sleep dry under that roof. If your work shelters them, then no theft can erase you. Tears welled in Diego's eyes, though he tried to hide them. He kissed her forehead gently. Gracias, mamá. The following week, the city released its shortlist. One design stood out, the modular housing proposal. Diego read the notice from afar, standing in the campus cafe where he delivered a pizza. He saw professors pointing to the article, nodding, murmuring praise. But when Adrian entered the room, smiling, students clapped him on the back. Brilliant, one said. You've outdone yourself. Diego turned away, heart pounding. He left the pizza on the counter and slipped outside before anyone noticed. That evening in the studio, Diego worked furiously as if to drown his anger. He built a larger cluster, 10 modules in a grid with shared kitchens, shaded walkways, small gardens. He penciled in notes. Community shelter. A roof covers the body. A courtyard shelters the soul. Lawrence entered quietly, watching him cut and glue. At last, the professor spoke. They are giving Adrian credit, Lawrence said. Diego's hand froze. But, Lawrence continued, truth cannot be stolen forever. A building, once built, carries the soul of its maker. Those who steal designs reveal only emptiness in their own. Diego swallowed hard. What should I do? Lawrence placed a hand on his shoulder. Work. That is your weapon. Work until no one can deny what you are. So Diego worked. Night after night, in silence, with no badge and no applause, he built modules that grew into villages on the table. And in those villages, though made only of cardboard, there was life. Children running in courtyards, mothers resting behind curtains, old men sitting in shade. He saw them all in his mind. And in that vision, he found the strength to keep drawing. He was the silent intern. He had no place on the roster, no grade in the ledger. Yet in the quiet hours of Columbia's studio, his pencil carved out something more permanent than names. It carved hope. And hope, Diego believed, was the only architecture that never collapsed. Rain fell that week in New York, steady and gray, drumming on the windows of Columbia's studios. Inside, Diego bent over his model village of cardboard modules. The smell of damp glue clung to his fingers. Outside those walls, the city buzzed with stories of the new modular housing design being praised by planners and professors alike. But the name being repeated was not his. It was Adrian's. Adrian walked the halls, smiling, shaking hands, receiving praise. Brilliant, some said. A breakthrough in affordable design. Diego kept his head low whenever Adrian passed. He knew whose lines were on those models. He had drawn them in the silence of midnight, alone with cardboard and prayer. But now, the credit was stolen. One evening, Lawrence entered the studio and found Diego sitting motionless at the table, pencil idle, his sketchbook closed. "Why have you stopped?" the professor asked. Diego's voice was flat. "What's the point, Professor? He has the name. He has the badge. If I draw another roof, he will claim it. If I build another model, they will cheer for him." Lawrence studied him. His eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Diego, listen. Architecture is not applause. It is the quiet fact that when the storm comes, a roof stands or it falls. Your work will stand. His will not." Diego shook his head. "But no one sees that." "Someone will," Lawrence said quietly. "The world bends slowly toward truth, but you must endure the bending." Diego looked away. He wanted to believe, but bitterness had begun to take root. That night at home, he slumped into the chair beside his mother's bed. She saw the heaviness in his shoulders at once. "What has happened, hijo?" she whispered. "They stole my work," Diego said, his voice breaking. "The world believes it was his, not mine, and I am nothing, just a boy with pizza boxes." His mother lifted her frail hand and touched his cheek. "Diego, listen to me. You do not draw for applause. You draw for the one who will live inside those walls. You draw for the man who has slept on the street for 10 winters. You draw for the mother who must tell her children, 'This is our home.' Do not surrender because thieves take credit. They cannot steal your reason." Tears pricked Diego's eyes. He bowed his head against her hand. "Mama, I am so tired." She smiled faintly. "Then rest. But tomorrow, draw again. Because tomorrow someone still needs a roof." Days passed. Diego forced himself back to the studio. His pride ached, but his hands kept moving. He began exploring variations, modules stacked in 2 levels, connected by light staircases, shared kitchens with shaded corridors. He wrote in his notes, "Steel fasteners may corrode. Use galvanized to resist. Timber members must be treated. Safety is dignity too." He worked slower now, more careful, as though each line were a scar he was choosing to carry. But the wound deepened one afternoon when he overheard voices in the corridor. Adrian was speaking loudly to a group of students. "Lawrence favors that pizza boy. Can you believe it? Letting him hang around the studio like some stray. It's embarrassing. He probably doesn't even know what Siegel FA means. He just scribbles words he doesn't understand." Laughter followed. Diego froze, hidden behind the doorway, his chest hollow. He did know what the formula meant. Stress equals force divided by area. It was the measure of how much weight a material could bear before breaking, and in that moment he felt like the formula itself, a small area carrying too much force. He packed his things quietly and left the studio that night without looking back. For 3 days, he stayed away. He delivered pizzas, wiped tables, tended his mother. But he did not draw. The pencils lay untouched. His satchel felt lighter without the sketchbook inside, but his chest felt heavier than stone. On the 4th day, Lawrence appeared at his apartment door. Diego opened it, startled. The professor stood in the narrow hallway, out of place among peeling paint and dim bulbs. "Why have you not come?" Lawrence asked. Diego lowered his eyes. "Because I am tired of fighting shadows." The professor entered, looking around the small room, the worn couch, the single lamp. He saw Diego's mother lying in bed, smiling faintly at the visitor. "Professor," she said softly, "forgive my son. He forgets that roofs matter more than names." Lawrence nodded, then turned to Diego. "Your mother is wise. Diego, listen to me. Pride is natural, but it is also dangerous. Do not let pride rob you of the gift you carry. Return to the studio. Work quietly if you must. But do not stop. Diego looked at his mother. She nodded, her eyes kind but insistent. At last, Diego whispered, "I will return." That night, back in the studio, he opened a fresh sheet of paper. His hand trembled at first, but then steadied. He drew a new plan, a village arranged around a central garden where children might play, where elders might sit in shade. He labeled it simply, Community Shelter, Phase 2. His notes included not only numbers, thermal mass, load distribution, ventilation rates, but also words meant for the heart. A courtyard is more than empty space. It is the soul of a community. He worked until dawn, exhaustion blurring the lines. Yet when he looked at the model taking shape, a peace filled him. The wound was not healed. Adrian still walked the halls with stolen credit, but Diego's pencil moved again, and that was enough to keep hope alive. Weeks later, the pilot project moved closer to reality. The city requested further details. Lawrence presented Diego's refined modules quietly, without revealing the author. The planners nodded, impressed. Adrian, too, continued presenting his polished versions. For the moment, the world seemed to cheer for him. But inside the silent studio, where cardboard villages rose night after night, Diego found his answer. His pride still ached, yes, but his work, his roofs, his walls, his courtyards remained. And one day he believed they would shelter lives. And in that truth, Diego chose to stand. October nights in New York carry a certain tension. Air sharp with the taste of rain, clouds moving heavy and low as though the city itself holds its breath. On one such night, Diego pedaled his bicycle through streets slick with drizzle, pizza boxes strapped to the rack. He glanced at the sky. The clouds swirled like bruises. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was not an ordinary rain. By midnight, the storm had fully arrived. Winds howled down the avenues, rattling traffic lights. Windows shuddered. On campus, the power flickered, then cut entirely. Columbia's grand facades fell dark, lit only by flashes of lightning. In the architecture studio, Diego was still working. The cardboard models trembled as gusts beat against the windows. Lawrence entered briskly, coat soaked, voice tense. "The roof of the community center on 110th has begun to fail," he said. "The city called. They need advice. The storm is tearing at the structure." Diego's eyes widened. "Advice? From us?" Lawrence nodded. "It's an old roof, flat and weak. They fear collapse. The people inside, children, families, they cannot be moved quickly in this weather. They asked for help. I told them we would try." He looked at Diego directly. "This is your chance. Your designs have spoken on paper. Now let them speak against the wind." Within minutes, they were in a van, rushing through rain that lashed like whips. Water pooled at corners, taxis stalled, sirens wailed. When they arrived, the community center loomed, a low brick building, lights flickering from a backup generator. Inside, dozens of families huddled together, blankets wrapped tight, eyes wide with fear. A city inspector met them, shouting over the storm. "The roof beams are failing. Too much lateral pressure. If the wind lifts one side, the rest will peel off like paper." Diego followed Lawrence up a narrow staircase to the attic space beneath the roof. He could hear the roar of wind just above, the wood groaning like a tired giant. Water dripped through seams, landing cold on his neck. Lawrence turned to him. "Think. What would you do?" Diego's mind raced. He knelt, examining the beams. "The roof is flat. That's the problem. Wind pressure is creating uplift. If one seam fails, The force distributes unevenly. He picked up a piece of chalk from a worker's toolbox and began sketching on the damp concrete wall. We need triangles, a truss system. Right now, these beams act like rectangles. They twist, they bend. But if we can brace them with diagonal supports, the load becomes distributed. Tension in one piece, compression in another, like ribs of a kite. The inspector frowned. We don't have time to build new trusses. Diego shook his head. Not permanent trusses, temporary braces. Use whatever long boards we can find. Nail them diagonally between beams. Each triangle will resist deformation. The wind will press, but the structure will hold. Lawrence watched him, then nodded sharply. He's right. It's basic mechanics. S equals F divided by A. The smaller the area taking stress, the faster it fails. But with triangular bracing, the forces spread. The roof may just endure. The inspector hesitated. And if it doesn't? Lawrence's voice was steady. Then it fails slower. And slower is enough to get these families through the storm. Work began immediately. Volunteers dragged planks from storage. Diego climbed the beams with a hammer, guiding others where to place the braces. Here, connect at 30 degrees. There, cross to the opposite beam. His voice was calm, though his heart pounded. Rainwater seeped in, soaking his clothes, but he kept climbing. Lightning flashed through cracks, illuminating the attic in bursts. Every nail driven echoed like a drumbeat. With each diagonal brace added, Diego could feel the structure stiffen. At one point, a young volunteer hesitated, the hammer slipping. "Why triangles?" he asked, voice shaking. Diego answered simply, "Because triangles don't change shape. They're the only shape that stays true when the wind pushes." The boy nodded, emboldened, and struck the nail home. Hours passed. The storm raged outside, tearing at the building. But inside, the braces held. Families downstairs huddled, listening to the creaks above, praying. At dawn, the winds finally eased. Rain softened to drizzle. The inspector climbed up, flashlight in hand. He looked around at the lattice of braces Diego had orchestrated, then exhaled. It held. By God, it held. Lawrence placed a hand on Diego's shoulder, soaked but steady. You see, your lines are not just graphite. They are wood and nails and the safety of children. This is architecture. Diego, exhausted, leaned against a beam. For the first time, he felt the full weight of his gift, not as drawings on a page, but as lives sheltered beneath. When they returned to campus later that morning, word of the night's events had already spread. Students whispered in corridors. Some looked at Diego differently, no longer as a pizza boy, but as someone who had stood against a storm. Yet others sneered, unwilling to accept that genius could wear a delivery jacket. Adrian was among them. He cornered Diego near the studio door. "So you patched a roof," Adrian said, voice dripping with contempt. "That doesn't make you an architect. Don't get ideas above your station." Diego said nothing. He simply walked past, still weary, still soaked. He had no energy for pride. His work had already spoken where words would fail. That night, Diego sat by his mother's bed, telling her everything. Her eyes glistened. "You saved lives," she whispered. He shook his head. "Not me. Just triangles, nails, and wood." She smiled faintly. "No, hijo. It was you who saw the triangles. Others saw only chaos. You saw order. That is your gift." Diego lowered his head, humbled. "Mama, maybe one day these designs will not just save a roof, but give people homes." Her hand squeezed his weakly. That day will come. Keep drawing. And so, in the quiet after the storm, Diego returned to his sketchbook. On its first new page, he wrote, Lesson of the storm. Every line must be true. Every angle must serve mercy. Architecture is not walls. It is the breath of safety in the middle of fear. Then he drew again, not for applause, not for revenge, but for the next storm. Because storms, like poverty, always come again. And when they do, Diego swore he would be ready. The storm passed, but its echoes remained. Word of what happened at the community center spread beyond Columbia's walls. Professors murmured about the boy who saved a roof with triangles. Students repeated the tale in hushed voices. Some dismissed it as rumor. Others began to wonder. Adrian, however, did not wonder. He fumed. Each whisper that Diego's design had held against the storm was another crack in his stolen crown. The more attention shifted toward the quiet delivery boy, the more desperate Adrian became. It happened one afternoon, in the largest lecture hall of the architecture school. Lawrence was presenting the results of the pilot project to the faculty. Students crowded in as well, eager to hear which designs the city had praised. At the front, models gleamed under bright lights, Adrian's sleek 3D prints, and beside them, the rougher cardboard modules that Diego had built by hand. Whispers ran through the crowd. Some recognized the cardboard as the same models Diego had been seen carrying at night. Lawrence cleared his throat. These, he said, gesturing to the cardboard village, are the designs that convinced the city to expand its pilot program. Practical, affordable, structurally sound. His voice softened. They endured a real storm when theory was not enough. They proved themselves with lives beneath them. A murmur of approval spread across the hall. Adrian stood abruptly. His voice rang sharp. And who, Professor, is the author of those? Lawrence paused. He looked at the students, then at Diego, who sat quietly near the back, hat pulled low. The professor's eyes lingered on him, but he did not answer immediately. Adrian seized the silence. Shall I tell you? That boy, he pointed toward Diego. That boy is no student of Columbia. He delivers pizzas to our dorms. He has no ID, no papers, no degree, and yet you let him sit in this studio as if he belongs. This is an insult to every one of us who worked to be here. Gasps filled the hall. Heads turned toward Diego. Some students looked startled, others mocking. A few looked quietly ashamed. Diego froze. The words struck harder than the storm winds. His heart pounded. He wanted to sink through the floor. Adrian pressed on. If these models are his, then the whole project is a fraud. The city is being deceived by a delivery boy pretending to be an architect. Lawrence stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp as glass. Enough. But Adrian would not stop. You always say architecture is truth, Professor. Then tell us the truth. Either this boy designed them, or he did not. If he did, then Columbia is a joke. If he didn't, then why is he here? The hall fell silent, every ear straining for Lawrence's answer. The professor looked at Diego, then at the rows of students. At last, he spoke. Yes, the boy is not enrolled. Yes, he delivers pizza. And yes, these designs are his. A ripple went through the room, half disbelief, half awe. Lawrence continued. He is not here by accident. He is here because talent does not ask permission, because roofs do not care about degrees, because in a storm it was his triangles, his braces, that kept families alive. Adrian's face flushed crimson. Then you break every rule of this institution, he shouted. You give credit to someone who does not belong. Lawrence's voice rose, not in anger, but in authority. Columbia exists for truth, not vanity. If truth comes from a boy in a delivery jacket, then so be it. But the damage was done. Faculty members exchanged uneasy looks. Rules were rules, and Lawrence had bent them. One stern professor stood. "This cannot continue. The university cannot allow outsiders to occupy its studios. However gifted he may be, he has no right to be here." Another added, "If the city learns a non-student is behind official proposals, it could tarnish our reputation." Lawrence's jaw tightened. "Reputation means nothing if it denies justice. You speak of rules. I speak of roofs over children." Still, the murmurs grew. Diego's presence had been tolerated in shadows, but exposed to light, it became a scandal. The head of the department finally declared, "Until further discussion, the boy must leave the studio. Effective immediately." The words fell on Diego like stone. He rose slowly, clutching his satchel. Dozens of eyes followed him, some mocking, some pitying, a few admiring. He walked past Adrian, who smirked triumphantly, then past Lawrence, who met his gaze with sorrow. At the door, Diego paused. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, to cry out that the drawings were his life. But no words came. He left in silence. That night, the city was quiet after the storm, but inside Diego's small apartment, the silence was louder than thunder. He placed his satchel on the floor and sat by his mother's bed. She saw his face and understood. "They cast you out?" He nodded. "They said I don't belong, and maybe they are right. I don't have a degree, I don't have a name, I only have drawings." His mother reached for his hand. "Diego, listen to me. A name on paper is not the same as a name in the heart of those who are sheltered. Did the children in that community center care about your badge? No. They cared that the roof did not fall." Diego closed his eyes, pain heavy in his chest. "But Mama, my heart wants both, the roof and the name." She stroked his hand gently. "Then keep drawing, keep building. Let the roofs come first. The name will follow when it must." The next morning, Diego returned to his pizza deliveries. He cycled past the university, past Avery Hall without stopping. Students crossed the campus, laughing, carrying models. He kept pedaling. For the first time in weeks, he felt like a stranger again. Yet deep inside, another voice stirred, a quieter one. It whispered that even if he was banished from the studio, the knowledge was already his. The equations lived in his mind. The structures lived in his hands. No one could take that. Back in his room that evening, Diego opened his sketchbook. On a blank page, he wrote, "Today they cast me out, but the roof still stands. If I must build in exile, I will. If my name is forgotten, my roofs will not be. Truth does not vanish when hidden. It waits." Then he began to draw again. Triangles, roofs, courtyards, homes, each line steady, each line stronger than pride. Days passed after Diego's expulsion from the studio. He delivered pizzas as before, cycling through rain and cold, watching Columbia's towers glow above him like a city on a hill he could no longer enter. The ache was sharp, but he buried it under motion. He told himself roofs mattered more than names. Still, each time he passed the campus gates, he felt like someone looking at a window lit warmly from inside, locked out in the night. Lawrence tried to intervene. He argued with the faculty, defended Diego's presence, but rules weighed heavier than compassion. "An outsider cannot claim work under the university's name," they said. "We cannot risk scandal." So Diego stayed silent. He kept his sketches close, drawing by candlelight at home, while his mother whispered encouragement. Yet the wound of injustice grew inside him. Then, one afternoon, a girl named Sarah, quiet, observant, a graduate student who often lingered in the studio late at night, found a folded paper left on a table. It was Diego's handwriting. A letter he had written to his mother but never mailed. She opened it hesitantly. The words were simple. Mama, one day I will build a roof cheap enough that no one has to choose between rent and food. I will build it strong enough that no storm can take it, and kind enough that a mother can rest without fear. Maybe my name will never be known. Maybe another will claim the work. But if the roof stands, if the children sleep dry, then I have done what I came to do. Sarah read it twice. Her throat tightened. These words were not for applause. They were for truth. She folded the letter carefully into her pocket. A week later, the School of Architecture gathered in the main hall for an exhibition. Students displayed their models, professors gave speeches, the city's planners attended. The atmosphere buzzed with pride. Adrian stood tall beside his glossy models, basking in admiration. Lawrence was there too, stone-faced, carrying the quiet weight of injustice he could not yet undo. When it came time for presentations, students filed forward one by one. Adrian delivered a confident speech about his innovative modular housing. His words were polished, his gestures rehearsed. Applause followed. Then, before the next speaker could step up, Sarah suddenly walked onto the stage. Murmurs rose. She had not been scheduled. She held up a folded piece of paper. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. I want to read something, she said. Not from an enrolled student, from someone you cast out. But if architecture is truth, then his words deserve to be heard. The hall fell silent. Sarah opened the letter and read aloud. One day I will build a roof cheap enough that no one has to choose between rent and food. I will build it strong enough that no storm can take it, and kind enough that a mother can rest without fear. Maybe my name will never be known. Maybe another will claim the work. But if the roof stands, if the children sleep dry, then I have done what I came to do. The hall remained still. No cough, no shuffle, no whisper, only the weight of those words filling every corner. Lawrence closed his eyes. He had read the boy's sketches, heard his explanations, but never until now had he heard Diego's heart spoken aloud. Tears pricked his eyes. Adrian shifted uncomfortably, the applause he had soaked in minutes earlier evaporating in the silence. Finally, someone in the audience, a senior professor long known for his severity, spoke softly. Who wrote this? Sarah answered clearly. Diego. The boy who delivered pizzas to our dorms. The boy who braced a failing roof during the storm while we were all asleep. The boy whose cardboard models are the reason the city even considered modular housing. A wave of murmurs spread again, but this time less mocking, more thoughtful. Some heads bowed, ashamed. Others nodded slowly. Lawrence stepped forward then, his voice deep and steady. This letter tells you more about architecture than any lecture I could give. Architecture is not the pursuit of prestige. It is the promise that walls will hold, that roofs will not leak, that life will be dignified even in poverty. And that promise came not from Adrian's polished prints, but from Diego's pencil and cardboard. He turned to the crowd. We denied him because of rules, but rules cannot erase truth. And the truth is this: Diego's work is architecture. More than that, it is mercy in wood and nail. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then a few students began to clap. The sound grew, filling the hall, echoing against marble. Not polite applause, but something deeper. A recognition. Almost an apology. Adrian slipped quietly out of the room, his face pale. Diego was not there. He was at that very moment delivering a pizza on Amsterdam Avenue, unaware that his words were being read to the entire faculty. When he returned home that night, his mother told him someone had visited. Sarah had come, leaving a note. "Your letter was read aloud today." The hall stood in silence. Some wept. They know the truth now. Sarah. Diego sat at the small kitchen table, the note trembling in his hands. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, at last, he whispered, "Mama, maybe roofs can speak even when their builder is silent." His mother smiled faintly. "I told you, hijo. Truth waits. It does not vanish." That night, Diego opened his sketchbook again. On a new page, he drew a wide courtyard lined with trees, surrounded by simple modules. At the center, he wrote, "Architecture is not fame, it is forgiveness." The day after Sarah's reading, Columbia's School of Architecture was not the same. The air in its halls was heavier, conversations quieter, as though everyone carried the echo of Diego's words. Professors whispered about integrity. Students, once dismissive, found themselves glancing at the empty chair in the back row where Diego had once sat quietly, sketchbook open. But change does not come easily to old institutions. By evening, the faculty convened an emergency meeting. At the center of the long oak table sat Charles Lawrence, face set like stone. Around him, colleagues murmured with unease. One professor spoke first. "We cannot allow our school's reputation to be jeopardized by a boy with no credentials." Another added, "The city believes these designs came from us, our enrolled students. If the truth spreads, it will be scandal. We cannot endorse an outsider." Lawrence leaned forward. His voice was calm, but iron lay beneath it. "The truth has already spread. The city planners know the design works. They care little for whose name is stamped upon it. Families sheltered under those roofs last week. That is not scandal. That is salvation." "But Lawrence," said another, "we must guard the sanctity of the degree. If we let anyone wander in, what value does our education have?" The professor's hands clenched on the table. "Education is not a gate. It is a gift. And that boy, Diego, taught you all what education should be. He learned from books, from workers, from wind itself. He taught us that architecture belongs not to the privileged, but to the human heart." The debate raged for hours. Some argued for protection of rules, others for recognition of truth. Finally, the dean raised a hand. "Lawrence, what do you propose?" The professor stood. His tall frame was weary with years, yet his voice carried the weight of a verdict. "I propose we recognize Diego as a fellow, not a student bound by tuition, not a faculty member bound by tenure, but a fellow, an honored guest whose work has proven itself. Let his designs remain under his name, with our support. If we deny him, we deny architecture itself." The room stirred with protests. "Impossible." "Against policy." "Unheard of." Lawrence raised his voice. "Unheard of? Then let us be the first. Institutions must not exist only to preserve themselves. They must serve the world. Diego serves the world. And if Columbia cannot honor that, then Columbia is no longer worthy of its own name." Silence followed. His words, like hammer strokes, left no space for reply. The dean looked around the table, then finally nodded. "We will vote." News of the debate leaked quickly. Students gathered in hallways, buzzing with speculation. Some feared Lawrence would resign. Others whispered that perhaps Diego would return, not as a shadow, but as a recognized voice. That night, Diego delivered pizzas as always, unaware of the storm raging inside Columbia's walls. When he returned home, Sarah was waiting on the steps of his apartment. "They are fighting for you," she said breathlessly. Diego frowned. "Who?" "Professor Lawrence. He stood against them all. He demanded they recognize you. They are voting tomorrow." Diego's heart pounded. "Voting? On me?" Sarah nodded. "On whether you will be allowed back, with your name attached to your work." He shook his head slowly. "Mama always told me, roofs matter more than names. Maybe I should not let them fight this battle." Sarah stepped closer, her eyes fierce. "Diego, your mother is right. Roofs do matter more than names, but sometimes names matter too, because without them, the world forgets the builder, and others will claim what was never theirs. If your name is not spoken, Adrian's will be. Which truth do you want to live in?" Diego swallowed hard. For the first time, he felt the weight of his own dignity pressing against his humility. The next day, the vote was held. Faculty filled the room, tension thick. Students crowded outside the door, waiting for news. Lawrence spoke last. His final words were not loud, but they carried through every corner. "You speak of rules. I speak of roofs. You speak of reputation. I speak of children dry in the rain. Decide what matters more." The ballots were cast. The dean read them aloud. One by one, the tide shifted. In the end, the motion passed, narrowly but decisively. Diego was to be recognized as an independent fellow of the school, his designs credited to his name, his voice allowed within the halls he had once entered only as a shadow. That evening, Lawrence found Diego outside the pizza shop, still in his delivery jacket, balancing boxes. "You're coming back," the professor said simply. Diego blinked. "What?" "The vote passed. Columbia will recognize you." The boy's knees weakened. He set the boxes down on the sidewalk, staring. "Professor, I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Lawrence replied. His voice softened. "Just keep drawing. Let the roofs speak for you." When Diego told his mother that night, she wept. Her thin hands pressed his face. "You see, hijo, you did not need to beg for a name. You earned it by keeping children safe in the storm. That is how names should be won." Diego kissed her forehead. "Mama, maybe one day I will build not only for strangers, but for you. A roof where you can watch the rain and not fear it." She smiled through her tears. "That is all I have ever wanted." Later, alone with his sketchbook, Diego wrote, "Today, the world bent. Rules nearly crushed me, but truth endured. The professor stood when I could not. His stand is now my inheritance. I must carry it further until roofs rise in every forgotten street." He closed the book, listening to the quiet drip of rain outside. The storm had passed. Another storm would come, yes. But now he was no longer a nameless shadow. He was Diego. And for the first time, the name felt like it belonged. Winter came softly to Harlem that year, snow dusting the rooftops and muffling the city's noise. In the weeks since the faculty's vote, Diego had walked Columbia's halls not as a shadow, but as one recognized, still humble in his jacket, still quiet in his steps but no longer unseen. His sketches bore his name. His models stood beside the glossy prints of others, no longer dismissed. Yet for Diego, the true weight of this change did not rest in applause or titles. It rested in the simple fact that his roofs had begun to rise. The city accepted the modular housing plan. In a vacant lot downtown, workers hammered beams into place, following lines once sketched in graphite on his kitchen table. Diego visited the site quietly, his breath hanging white in the cold air, listening to the rhythm of hammers. Each strike was like a heartbeat, his design made flesh. But his heart, though full, was not complete. One evening, as he sat by his mother's bedside, he saw her gaze drifting far away, into memories beyond reach. She was proud, yes, but her body grew weaker. He held her hand and whispered, "Mama, what would you like me to do with what I've learned?" Her eyes brightened faintly. "Diego, go back. Back to where we came from. To the village, where I was born. Build there. Teach there. Let children see that roofs can be made from mercy as well as wood." Diego bowed his head. "I will." Spring thawed the city. Colombia honored Diego in a quiet ceremony, presenting him not a degree, but something rarer, a fellowship in his own name. Lawrence spoke few words, only these. "This boy taught us that architecture is not learned first in lecture halls, but in hunger, in storms, and in love. May his path remind us of our duty." Students clapped. Some cried. Adrian did not attend. The next week, Diego left, not to another campus, but to a dusty town in the south where his mother's people lived. He carried little, his sketchbook, a few pencils, and the fellowship stipend Columbia had granted him. The village was small, ringed by dry fields and weathered barns. Houses leaned with age, patched with tin and tar paper. Children played in dust. Elders sat on porches, too fragile to bear storms. Diego walked the streets slowly, taking it all in. He felt both foreign and home. At the edge of town, he chose a patch of land beside the community church. He unrolled his sketches on the hood of an old truck. The villagers gathered around, curious. "This," Diego said gently, "will be our first house. Simple, but strong. Cheap, but dignified. And I will not build it alone. You will build it with me." He showed them the lines, modules sized like pallets, beams braced in triangles, rainwater gutters feeding barrels. He explained in words plain as bread. "Air must move. Hot air rises, so we give it a way out. Cool air enters from below. That is how a room breathes. Walls must insulate, so we use layers of straw and plaster. It keeps heat in winter, cool in summer. And the roof, always the roof first, must be pitched to carry rain away. A good roof is mercy." The elders nodded. The children listened, wide-eyed. The people began to gather scrap wood, nails, even old metal sheets. Together, they worked. Days turned to weeks. The house rose slowly, beam by beam, under Diego's guidance. Villagers hammered, sawed, lifted. Diego taught them how to cut braces diagonally, how to test the strength by pressing against frames. When children asked why the walls had triangles, he smiled. Because triangles tell the truth. They never change shape. Even the wind cannot lie to them. At last, the roof was nailed in place. The gutters caught their first rain. A barrel filled, drop by drop. Inside, the air was cool. Light moved gently across the room. When the first family moved in, an elderly woman and her 2 grandchildren, the village gathered outside. Diego's mother, too frail to stand, was carried in to see. She touched the wall, rough but solid. She touched the curtained doorway. She looked at her son. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Diego knelt beside her. "Not just mine, Mama. Yours too. You taught me roofs matter more than names. This roof carries both. She smiled, and for a moment, the years of suffering in her body seemed to lift. In the months that followed, Diego did not stop. He built more houses, then a classroom shaded by trees. He drew plans in the dirt with a stick so children could understand. He taught them that formulas like C equals FA were not mysteries, only reminders that everything carries weight, and weight must be shared. He showed them that our values were not symbols, only the warmth or coolness they felt when stepping inside. The village changed. Where there had been fear of storms, there was now laughter under roofs that held. Where there had been shame in broken walls, there was now pride in spaces shaped by their own hands. Diego became less a builder than a teacher. He handed children pencils, encouraged them to sketch their own courtyards and stairways. "Draw what you dream," he said, "and then build it. A dream is only strong when it becomes shelter." One evening, as the sun set gold over the fields, Lawrence arrived. He had traveled long to find the village, his hair whiter now, his steps slower. He stood watching as children ran through a courtyard of modules, their laughter echoing between walls. Diego approached, surprised. "Professor? You came?" Lawrence smiled faintly. "I had to see for myself, to see where your lines have led." They walked together through the village. Lawrence touched the beams, the gutters, the barrels. He nodded silently at each detail. At last he said, "This is more than architecture. This is inheritance. You have given them roofs, yes, but more than that. You have given them the knowledge to build their own. That is the true legacy." Diego lowered his eyes, humbled. "I only followed what you taught me, Professor." Lawrence shook his head. "No, Diego. You followed what your mother taught you. I only cleared the path." They stood in silence, listening to the sounds of the village settling under safe roofs. That night, Diego opened his sketchbook by lamplight. On the final page, he wrote, "Names fade, degrees fade, but roofs endure. If one child sleeps dry, if one mother rests without fear, then my work is complete. Architecture is not glory. It is forgiveness, mercy, and the quiet endurance of truth." He closed the book. For the first time in his life, he felt no hunger for more. He was full. Above him, the roof creaked gently in the night wind, not a warning, but a lullaby. And in that sound, Diego knew. His story had become more than sketches. It had become shelter. Thank you for staying with Diego's story until the very end. May it remind us all that even the smallest roof can hold great mercy, and that every act of patience and kindness shelters someone. Your time here is deeply appreciated.